Jeems. Welcome, finally, to the Fairview Social Podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, I know you had to walk about 500 feet down here in order to join me on this historic event this evening.
Yeah, well, actually, I would say it was probably 1,500 feet because I was down here already, and then you made me go get your shirt and your hat and then come back. So, 1,500 feet, but not bad.
Well, I didn't want to get on here looking trashy like I did a moment ago.
I thought you looked fine. Kimmy would have told you to clean yourself up.
She did. She probably told me that earlier when she was here.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway. So I wanted to have you on here tonight so we could talk about the children. It's a big week, actually a big couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Jack got some awards or an award last night for being in some class that he apparently cheated to get.
So he says, yeah.
I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is.
I think all of our kids don't give themselves the credit they deserve. They're smarter than they say they are. He says he cheated to get through it, but I'm sure, Google probably helped him out a little bit, but our kids have brains.
Well, these days, Google probably helps a lot of kids through a lot of things because even at work, it's funny because anytime there's a problem, I don't say, did you Google it? Because then I'd be out of a job. Mm-hmm. But I usually Google whatever issue there is that I don't know the answer to.
Well, that's how I became a Google doctor.
That's right.
I am a Google doctor, and I find out a lot of things on Google. People ask me questions, and I just get them answers really fast because I'm a Google doctor.
Well, you are a Google doctor. Anytime there's an issue with anybody in the family, you look it up on Google. And honestly, most of the time it's right.
I know. Because I'm a doctor.
I know. So this week, actually next week, Jack graduates high school. And so that marks a milestone for us. And over the past couple of weeks, I've been thinking about, like, how did we get here? Like, what was the start of it? When we got married, Eli was very young. He wasn't even in school. But what I was thinking about was how I had this hardcore rule that I did not want the kids to ride the bus.
I knew you were going to say that, yeah.
And the reason I didn't want them to ride the bus is because all of the bad things that I ever learned, ever, in school, which this wasn't technically in school, I learned on the bus. And so after we got married and we did all the things and the kids were getting into school, I told you, you can work if you want to work. It's like, I'll go make the money however we need to make it, but I do not want the kids riding the bus. Mm-hmm. And people can say whatever they want, and they can disagree with me if they want, but our kids are not screwed up because I did not make them ride the bus.
They could be screwed up for other reasons, but not because of the bus.
Yes, that's true. So you took them to school every single day. Mm-hmm. And I know it seems like a long time ago where you didn't have to do that anymore, but we went through nearly 20 years of you taking them to school every day.
Yeah, until Eli got his license, and then Haydn got his, and then Jack got his.
But the thing is like, it wasn't just like they got their license and it just rode out. It's like it became like, Eli got his license, so he was able to take Haydn, and I guess sometimes Jack. It was all messed up because of where the schools were and all that, like the times that they started.
Yeah, Eli was able to take Haydn, but I still had to take Jack.
But there was always some sort of like level of taking them up until, I guess, Jack got his license. It's probably about a year ago.
Yeah, well, Ethan next door got his license first, and so Ethan started driving them, and then Jack started driving himself. But yeah, there was driving back and forth to the schools involved for quite a while. And I'm glad that I jumped on board with your
Psychotic.
rule on the bus, because I agree. I think it was a good decision. I think it's a safer decision. And when we were growing up and on the bus, there was a lot of bullying and no oversight, and kids were doing things they shouldn't do. So I'm glad we did that. I mean, so we can say everything bad they learned, they didn't learn on the school bus. They learned it in public school or from their friends, but not on the bus.
Or at home listening. Listening to us. But, I mean, that's a pretty huge feat if you think about it, because we're talking Eli's 25, Haydn is 21, Jack just turned 18. I mean, that's a lot of years of taking the kids to school and doing all of that. And I don't know why that always stuck with me, but that was like a big thing in my mind that, like, I didn't want the kids to ride the bus. And we were able to pull that off. And I guess, this year, the senior year for Jack, that between him and Ethan, they were able to drive themselves to school. And so you got out of doing that. So what was that like to not have to do any of that anymore?
Well, there were still a couple of times when I did it, but for the most part, I didn't have to do it. And really, I just never really think about it, because that's just what I've always done. So it didn't matter if there was a one-off where I needed to take him or pick him up or whatever. Like if Ethan had driven him to school, but he wanted to check out early, or if he had a doctor's appointment, I still went and did that. But I never really thought about that. But the whole getting our last kid out of high school, that I'm thinking about. And that feels really good. That feels like a big thing. And we can just move on to the next phase of our lives and focus on being grandparents and still parents, obviously, because kids still need us. And Jack's not moving out immediately. So
yeah,
there's that. But it's just like getting out of having kids in school feels really good.
We've been married for a long time, and to think that this milestone, Jack turned 18. I guess when this airs, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks. But like, he turned 18, and that's fine and all, but like, graduation was a big thing. And it's funny for me, because the graduation being a big thing is what sticks out in my mind. Is my mom was always proud of me, Nathan, and Joseph for graduating, because she never graduated high school. So in her mind, she wanted to make sure that her boys graduated.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, she never graduated. She got a GED later when she started working, but it was a big deal. I remember when Nathan graduated high school, it was like a huge thing for her because she never had graduated. But obviously, Eli and Haydn graduating is a huge deal, and Jack is a huge deal too. But I think that it's a milestone for us, because that means it all, like, in my mind, it's like, hey, we got 3 kids to adulthood, at least to 18, which is considered an adult, and they graduated high school. So it's almost kind of like you can take that long breath and be like, we did it. We got them, obviously we're still here for them, whatever they need and all that. And it's not like we stopped parenting after that, but I guess it's just a good milestone to have them graduated.
Yeah. Well, and Hayden graduating college was a big deal too, because nobody in either of our families had done that.
That's true.
I mean, I have, Kimmy had graduated college, but nobody in their direct lineage had graduated college. So when Hayden graduated college, he was the first Hollis to do that.
Yeah, this is a huge deal. Haydn, he actually graduated high school a year early, and we can talk about that. I had a lot of problems with just dropping his ass off in the middle of New York when he was 17, but that's what we did. Yeah,
there was quite a few aspects of that where I feel like you were very cautious and wanting to, do the dad thing and keep him safe. But Mom was kind of on the same page with Hayden, where I felt like it was a faith step to do it. And I remember, Hayden was going into New York to do actor Broadway things, and it was in COVID season where Broadway was shutting down and everybody was telling him, don't go to New York. New York is shutting down. Don't go there for this. And I just felt like God told me, I need more Christians in New York. And he had closed every door. Haydn had applied to 1,000 colleges, got into every college, but not every theater program. The only theater program he got ended up being one of the most prestigious, which was, I feel like, a God thing. And so I felt like, looking at that, God shut all these doors, but he opened this one. So this is where we need to go. And again, I felt like he told me he needed more Christians in New York. And Hayden's doing big things up there, so it's working out well. It's expensive. It's crap, but
expensive. I'm ready for Haydn to come home.
I know. You've been ready since he left, I know.
I'm not like the loving parent or anything like that, but I do want him here. I want him close, and I'm happy that he'll be here next week, and maybe we can convince him to move back. Probably not, but
I think he's got a plan. You know, his plan is not to be in New York forever. He loves small town, Southern culture. He loves everything like that down here, but he knows where he's got to be for now.
I didn't realize that. I said in a different podcast or something that he likes the fast-paced life, and he quickly corrected me that he does not like it.
No, he does not. He prefers home. He prefers Tennessee, but again, he's got goals. He's very driven, very hardworking, and he knows the connections he needs to make and the things he wants to do is in New York City.
Yeah.
But hopefully he does well enough for himself that he can come back home and still do those things.
Yeah, and Eli doing all of his things. I remember with Eli, he graduated high school, and he was ready to join the Army, and I was like, no, you just need to wait. Just make sure that's what you really want. Because I guess in my mind, I was like, you know, I don't want someone going to the Army just because they feel like they have to. Maybe, you know, I'm not saying that Eli didn't do great in high school. He got by. But like, I guess I just didn't want it to be like he joined the Army because he didn't feel like there was any other option. So I told him to just hang out and wait. And Eli, being loyal and obedient that he is, he did that. And he hung out and he waited and he worked some jobs and did the things. And finally, I remember he said, "Can I join the Army now?" And I remember thinking, I was like, you know, I don't want this. But as a parent, what you struggle with is like, just because you don't want it doesn't mean that, you know, your kids or whatever else, it's like, they're not you. And I remember like my dad telling me all of these things that were, you know, maybe true for him, but not true for me. It's like, cause I'm not him. And just like Eli's not us. And just because I don't like the idea of it doesn't mean that it needs to happen. And so finally, I guess it was more like I kind of gave him the blessing of, yeah, you know, do whatever you need to do. And he immediately signed up and went to the Army, because we talked about this in Chris Cavy's podcast, that like, you got to have people like that just like are eager to join and want to do those things. And Eli is that person. And so I'm proud of him for doing that. And, you know, whether at the time I didn't agree with it, I 100% agree with it now. I mean, that's just who he is and what he does. And same with Haydn doing, you know, that's not my plan for you to move to New York and do all of this. You need to stay in the hometown and not do any of these things. And you need to do what I did, which is absolutely not true. And it's cool to see them go out and do these things, and they're still here. So, and it's not like you just lose them completely, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I like seeing the adult versions of them emerging and them paving their own paths for themselves. I remember, you know, Eli was in JROTC every single year in high school, excelled in it. Didn't excel in his other things because he just didn't care about them, even though he was plenty smart enough to excel in everything. But I remember the beginning of his senior year, you know, my own fears about him going into the military were prominent, and I just worried about him going off to war and all these things. And so I, similarly to you, telling him, take a year off, make sure this is what you want. Well, beginning of senior year, I remember asking him, Eli, if you could do anything in the world as an adult, what would you want to do? And he said, Mom, if you don't know by now, you're never going to know. Because he knew. He wanted to be a medic in the Army.
Well, it's funny because it's like hard for me to believe. It's like, I don't know, you don't know this, but like in my mind, like when you're growing up and you need to decide what you're going to do with your life, and they put a lot of pressure on you in school to decide what you're going to do. And it's like, it's hard for me to believe that anybody's like, you know what, I just want to be an accountant.
Yeah.
God, there's nothing I want more than to be an accountant. And to me, that's just completely ridiculous, and it's funny, and I make jokes about it, but there are people that want to work with numbers and do all of those things. And so I guess that was kind of like, for me, it's like, nobody wants to go to the Army and do these things, but Eli wanted to do that, and he's excelled at that. He's done great with all of that. Haydn, same in New York. It's like he's gone out there. I was completely against, you don't want to go to school and do all that kind of stuff. You just you need to do this. No, they need to pave their own way. And it's like, yes, we can give advice and do all of those things as parents, but at the end of the day, they're going to make their own decisions, whether they're good or bad. I guess it's through the eye of the beholder if it's good or bad, but for them, they're their own people.
Yeah.
And as a parent, that's what you got to understand is maybe what you want for your children is not the same as what they want. And a lot of parents mess that up.
Yeah.
And they can strain the relationships because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I also disagree with the whole putting pressure on people to have their careers figured out by the time they're a senior in high school or even a year before that so they can apply to the right colleges. I just don't think that is a good, healthy thing because, not everybody knows. I mean, Jack is still figuring it out. And when I graduated high school, went to college the first time, been to college a few times, but the first time I was going to be a teacher and an actress. And knowing myself now, I never would have been happy doing that. And luckily it didn't work out quite so well, so I didn't never finish those degrees, but that's what I was going for because that's what I thought I wanted because how well does anybody really know themselves at 18?
Well, is that because the pressure of like them telling you got to do this or you got to do that is you're like, okay, well then I want to be a teacher or I want to be an actress or I mean, I think that my family back then when I graduated high school, my parents were divorced and it was just my dad and he was never my dad, he was never like, you need to do this or you need to do that. You're going to college because in his mind, he was like, well, fuck it. I'm not going to push him going to college because I don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so there was none of that, but it worked out for the good because I don't need college to do what I've done. And honestly, that was a very unpopular opinion back then, 20 years ago or so, because now it's like I'm 100% firm believer, and I've said this to the kids and I've said this to you, that I don't believe that anybody needs college unless you're going to be like a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. Like, yes, you need education for that because you can learn anything you need to learn on YouTube, which we didn't have when we were younger.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I guess you can't learn to get shot at and be an Army medic through YouTube videos, but Eli wanted to do that, and he did that. And Haydn, he moved out to New York, and he's living his dream. And it took me a long time to adjust to that, to be okay with it, but I am okay with it.
Yeah.
And then with Jack, it's like, he's got people around him where they've got their quote unquote lives figured out, and they're going to college to do this or that, and that's 100% fine. I'm happy for him, but I'm not going to push on to Jack that you have to go to college and you have to do this thing because I didn't go to college and I didn't do any of those things, and I've made a pretty good life for us by building my way up in a company, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's very inspirational. I think that's just as admirable as going and getting a college degree. I mean, you worked yourself from the ground up, you know, taking the lowest jobs at the company and working your way up to one of the biggest jobs at the company, which is fantastic. But it was like you had to have some skills and elements in order to do that. You had to be a self-starter. You had to have the willingness to learn and the eagerness to learn the different things that you were pursuing. With you, mostly it's technology. You know, you've always been great at that, but...
Well, I mean, for people that don't know, it's like when I got out of high school, I was good at two things. I could make pizzas and I did landscaping. And a part of that was working with my brother Nathan and, you know, doing landscaping and him helping me get a job. And so I had no direction, and I've kind of built my way up. That's the thing. You don't have to go to college and you don't have to do all of that stuff, but you damn sure have to make sure that you're a self-starter. Mm-hmm. You're dedicated. You're going to do the shit things. You're going to do the things that suck in order to get to like what you want to do. And a lot of people, a lot of younger generation, and hell, frankly, our generation, there's a lot of people that maybe don't want to do that. And you're not going to get anywhere if you don't do that.
No, you're going to be in very stagnant jobs, and you're not going to experience growth in yourself, probably personally or professionally, but definitely professionally.
Well, it's funny because even the people that come in and work now, I've been working at the same company for 17, 18 years. And it's like I did the shit jobs for, you know, several years in the beginning. And like people come in and they have the understanding, and they're like, okay, I'm going to have to do the shit job. But they want to do it for about 3 or 4 weeks. And they're like, hey, where's this better job? I'm like, no, you're going to have to do the shit job for a few years. Mm-hmm. You got to put in your time, and you got to be dedicated, and you got to excel at that, because it's going to give you the experience that you need and the understanding of the business that you need in order to, you know, go to the next job.
Yeah.
And to be able to prepare yourself for the next job. And a lot of the kids now don't seem to understand that you got to put in your time. And it's funny because I've been in a position where I've hired people and things like that. And it's like they come in and they're like, oh, I have a degree in this. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about your degree. Who are you as a person? Like how would you handle this situation as a person? And if you're childlike in that aspect, then you're worthless for this position.
Yeah, the degree doesn't do you any good. I read a really good book called The Ideal Team Player, and in that book it talks about these traits that you need to have, these traits that you need to hire for, and you can have all the skills and knowledge in the world, but if you don't have these traits, you're going to be a horrible coworker or employee. And it's the main ones are humble, hungry, and smart. If you're not hungry, if you're not humble, if you're arrogant, nobody's going to want to work with you, and you're going to cause a toxic workplace. If you're not hungry, then you're going to have no drive to do better where you're at, or to learn, or to grow in any aspect. And then smart is more about, you know, emotional intelligence and people intelligence. So it's like it all is very important in the working world. Those things are really important, more so than a degree, I think.
I was a manager at, and this is ridiculous and it's kind of funny to think, but I was a manager at Mellow Mushroom. This is a light example. And so I would hire people and all that kind of stuff, and people would come in and, you know, you'd have to hire servers and cooks and all that
bartenders.
Kind of stuff. Bartenders. And so people would come in, and people out there in the food industry know that, you know, if you're an awesome server, then you can learn the bartender shit. That's like not a big deal, but you have to juggle. And it's like that with any business, but people would come in and they'd say, oh, well, you know, I went to bartending school, and so this person's just gotten out of bartending school and they want to come in and get a job. And I'm like, fuck no. It's like, you don't want those people. You don't want to have anything to do with any of those people, because you want the people that are, and I even say, I mean, I'm not in a management position to where I'm like hiring people and stuff now. I do technology now where I'm at, but when I was, it's like they come in, I'm like, can you juggle these things? Can you juggle the problems that you're like, how are you going to problem solve these things? As a bartender, yes, you know how to make this drink, great. But how are you going to deal with this bar being full? And then also you've got like 4 or 5 tables over here that you're supposed to manage. It's like, I don't want that. You got to have somebody that can juggle all of the hard things. And so like, even at work, people come in like, oh, I have a degree in horticulture. Okay, I don't give a shit about that. Good for you. In my mind, I'm like, well, you wasted your time for 4 years or whatever it took you to get that. It's like, are you able to juggle customers yelling at you and dealing with all of these kind of things? It's like, how are you going to manage that? And to me, it's a huge deal. That's why I say that you can learn anything that you need to know on YouTube, and a lot of it's your upbringing, a lot of it's your work ethic. You got to do the grunt jobs, no matter what. It's like people watch Mike Rowe's Dirty Jobs. He basically teaches you that, like, don't be above doing these shitty jobs, because it's going to prepare you for being a good leader and a good manager and a good supervisor.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Jeems?
Well, I think there is, I think those grunt jobs are taken for granted, because, where I work, I started off as an admin and I was great at it. And then I moved up into management, was managing a lot of teams, and work got piled on, like ridiculous amounts of work got piled on me because I could do everything. Well, it got to be too much, and I took a summer off, and then I went back to a grunt job, and guess what? So much more peaceful, so much more happy. Not that an admin is a grunt job. It's really not. I do a lot of orchestrating in the department, but it's more peaceful.
I think the reality of all of this is that there's no grunt jobs. They're all learning experiences for you to get out there in the world and do whatever you're going to do. But you have to, you can't, that's the problem. One of the problems that I have with kids going to college is they go to college. It's just an extension of high school. And you and I had this conversation earlier that, like, I don't get emotional and upset about the kids doing, you're like Jack or Eli or Haydn graduating high school. Yes, I'm proud of them, but at the same time, it's not emotional for me because, okay, you got this phase out of your life. This is a blip in your life. You got to get your ass out there and you need to do something. Mm-hmm. But, and this is not all cases, but I don't want the kids to go to college and then you have 4 years, 6 years, 10 years, depending on what you're doing, of this whole college life. You're not in the real world. And then you finish with your college and then you try to go get a job. And I'd say that 75% of the jobs are like the managers like me, where I'm just like, oh, okay, you went to college all these years. Yes, that's great that you were committed. 9 times out of 10, it's because your parents made you go to college. Mm-hmm. But, like, well, how are you going to handle these real world things?
Yeah.
And those kids don't have that experience.
Yeah. When I got into guest services, I had a boss who had degrees and I didn't have degrees. But dude didn't know a thing about really loving people well or listening to people or making them feel welcome. I feel like he didn't value people at all. And I was constantly frustrated because this guy with a degree or 2 was my boss, but I felt like I knew a lot more about how to deal with people personally, and whether it was a conflict situation or, an emotional situation or whatever it was. I just feel like I was a lot better. I had a lot more world experience with different crazy types of people and sane types of people. And it's just really frustrating because a degree doesn't tell you what life experience can tell you. And yeah, sometimes you need both.
Well, that's the problem is, again, I don't want to be misinterpreted here that getting a degree and going to college, that's all great. And there's a spot for you. But there's something to be said about, and I think that it's more acceptable now. I mean, even 10, 20 years ago, it's like, you know, if you didn't have a degree, it's like it was hard for you to find a job. Mm-hmm. But for me, like when I'm hiring somebody, I'm just like, I want to talk to that person and see like their responses to my questions and to see their outlook on life or anything like that, to see if they're ready for something like that. Because I'm telling you, I've seen hundreds of people come in out of college and they're just like, I'm ready to work. No, you have no fucking clue of what work is. It's like, you know, they try to come in, and I always break it down back to that bartender managing Mellow Mushroom example, because it's a very good example, a very simplistic example of someone, because I always think of Nathan, my brother. He's like, he went to bartending school, and he's like, I can go get a bartending. No, you can't get a fucking bartending job. It's because you can't juggle all the things. Yeah, you can make it the drink, but hell, I've seen in my experience, it's like, you got a full bar, you got all these tables filled up, and you got your phone over here and you're like Googling how to make whatever drink somebody ordered. I'd rather that happen than, you know how to make that drink and you don't know how to deal with the customers, because at the end of the day, it's customer service. That's your job. That's how you make your money. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, historically, most companies have hired for skill, but then they fire because of character. Mm. So it's like, you know, they want to check off all the boxes that this person can manage these programs and has this, you know, intelligence or this skill or understanding of software maybe. But then they end up firing the person based on they're impossible to work with. They made customers angry or whatever else. It's like historically you've hired on skill, fired on character, but I think that's a shift that's turning with all these, you know, business self-help books and all that stuff. It's starting to turn the corner to where more companies are looking at these business books, these new age business books about hire for character, and those people are going to be the ones who last longer and do better for the team.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's a whole situation of, yes, the college is fun. It teaches you discipline. It teaches you going and learning. It teaches you accomplishing something. But you can do all of those things without college. And it's more acceptable now to be able to go get a job without college. And if somebody sees a spark in you, because again, as a manager, and I look at somebody, if I see that spark, someone that's like, hey, this guy's going to get something done. This guy's going to change. How is this going to elevate my company? How are we going to go to the next level? Is this guy a part of, or this guy or gal going to be a part of taking this company to the next level? That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And so it's funny. Like, I don't ever really look at job descriptions. I was looking at some earlier just to kind of see what people are looking for. And a lot of times people put on their required associates or bachelor degree or whatever, or equivalent. Mm-hmm. It's always or equivalent, because they don't want to count you out, because, you know, you could be that not count you out person that's like just rocking and rolling. You know, there's diamonds in the rough. There's people out there. And I guess to rewind this all back to our kids, like, you know, I think that our kids are smart, and they're capable and can think for themselves. And I don't feel the need to push college and to push these things on them, because I feel like they can make that decision. If Haydn thinks that he needs to go to school for this, then whether I like it or not, I'll support him doing it. And I learned that from Eli, because like I always think about him graduating and to me, I just told him like, hey, I don't want you to go to the military right now. Just wait. And then I forgot about it because I'm going on with my life. And then it was kind of like, I remember him texting me or calling me like, hey, can I go to the Army now? And I'm like, oh shit, I forgot about that. Yeah. Do whatever you need to do. So that's why like Haydn is passionate about doing the acting and wanting to go to college in New York for that. Now, granted, I didn't like him leaving at 17 and doing all that, but those are all hurdles that you get over. But like with Jack now, if Jack said, hey, I'm really passionate about going to this college, these are the reasons why I think it would be good, I would 100% support him. I know that he doesn't have that on his mind right now. He wants to work for a company and build himself up. And he can do that, whether it be like, I'm supportive of it, because whether it be like at the company that he goes and chooses to work at, he's learning that he's getting that grunt work stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
The problem with the kids that go to college is they go through the college and then they have to go through the grunt work, and then they can move to these positions. They're just extending this whole reach for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
They're not in all cases.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm clear on that, because sometimes you can go and get whatever degree, and then all of a sudden you go out and you're, doing this thing, and that's great. But with a lot of jobs, it's just not the case.
Yeah. I always advise people, if you want to do something creative with your life, great. Make sure to take business classes, because if you're going to be an artist and sell paintings or sell music or do photography or anything like that, specifically for the arts, I always say, don't get a degree in art, get a degree in business, because you're going to have to market yourself. You're going to have to sell your work, and you got to have those skills. But again, a lot of those skills you can learn online. But if you feel the need for a degree, that's what I would advise. Don't go for the art degree, go for the business degree. And another thing I'll say, which I think holds true for all 3 of our kids, is I've always had this philosophy that there's nothing I don't know that I can't learn. So in the hiring process, if you're looking at a candidate for a job and they don't have all the skills, but they are eager to learn, they're hardworking like our kids are, they're gonna have a lot better shot at that job than somebody who has the skills but doesn't want to learn anything, doesn't want to work with anyone, things like that. But I think that's a confidence I have, because I know when our kids or any kids are really passionate about something, they're going to figure it out. They're going to want to learn. They're going to pursue it. Eli was never passionate about anything except for playing in the woods, animals, wild animals, and the military and JROTC. And so, he's got a lot of random information in his mind about all those things. But, he wouldn't apply himself in his classes in high school because he wasn't interested. But when it mattered, when he was interested and passionate, he applied himself 100%. And, he probably almost failed every math or science class he had in high school, not because he wasn't smart enough, but because he wasn't interested. But the second he got into this medic program in the Army, he studied his butt off. He applied everything he had for that because he was passionate about it. And so, yeah, whatever Jack decides to pursue, I don't have any concerns, because I know when a child is interested and passionate, they're going to most likely, if they're raised well, I think, if they're raised with good morals, I think they're going to know, all right, now's my time to work hard and make this happen. And Jack was just actually talking to me earlier about wanting to get a weighted vest because he's really interested in doing firefighting, and he's already reached out to a police chief, and it's like, you and I didn't direct him to do this. He on his own is advocating for himself and pursuing what he's interested in, and he's talking about training for a few months to a year and then getting in on a firefighting job somewhere. So
yeah, that's what's good about that.
This is without us having to push them at all.
I think that that's the hardest lesson for me to learn as a parent, is that, like I said earlier, what Eli wants is different than what I want. What Jack wants or what Haydn wants is different than what I want. Because the way that my dad taught me is like, you need to find a job and you need to stick with that job and you need to build your way up in it, which is not bad advice, but it's also not good advice, because he did that himself and he was miserable doing that.
Yeah.
He got himself into something that he didn't really want to do. And a lot of people go through this. They start out young. They go and they have this shitty job that they're doing. Next thing you know, well, shit, I got a wife. And now I got a kid or a husband. I have a spouse and I've got kids. And all of a sudden you're just stuck in doing that thing. And you're fucking miserable the whole time.
Yeah. I feel like you felt like that in your adult life.
Yeah. I mean, I've felt like that many times. Luckily, I'm in a job in a company where, you know, I've jumped around positions that I'm doing because, like, I love the company that I work for, but maybe not necessarily the job that I'm doing. And it can change that. And so, and then it flips around to where now my kids are old enough to do all of these things, and I want to give them good advice, but I'm giving them the advice that my dad would give, or not giving them advice, but I'm having the thinking process that my dad did. Oh no, you don't want to take the risk on that. No, you know, you need to play it safe. Oh, Eli, you have a wife and a kid. You need to make sure that you're doing this. And it's just, no, take the risk. Yeah. You know, you're going to survive whatever happens to you, no matter what. You know, Eli's in a different situation because he's married and has a kid. Haydn and Jack, the future's wide open for them to do whatever they want. And my advice, unlike my father's advice, would be like, go out and do whatever. Because even now, and that's why this is a huge deal for us, that, you know, the kids have graduated and we've got them to adulthood to where we're in our 40s now. And it's like, we can do that. You're in school to do, you know, the things that you're doing that we felt like we couldn't do. I guess technically now I could do, if I just decided to just blow up our lives and say, you know what, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go join a cult.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make money by playing Kumbaya songs. And this guy, well, I wouldn't do that, but I'm just saying that, like, play it safe, but don't play it safe. The kids are young. Do whatever. Jack, do whatever you want to do, whatever your heart desires. You don't have to make the decision now. I don't like the pressure that people put on each other. I don't know if the schools are putting pressure on Jack or any of these other seniors that are graduating here pretty soon to, you have to have your life figured out, because I'm 43.
Mm-hmm. Correct. You got it this time.
No, I'm 43, mm-hmm. Almost 44.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have my life figured out.
Yeah, I mean, every life goes through seasons. I thought I wanted to be an actress and a teacher when I was 18. But when I was 13, I wanted to be a nun. And then, like, in 8th grade...
Whoa.
Yeah.
We see how that went.
Yeah, that didn't really pan out. But I was serious about it. I was real serious about it. But, you know, I went through a season of being a stay-at-home mom, and that was such a joy. I loved that time when the kids were young and I was home with them. That was one of my favorite things I've ever done. And then, you know, I taught myself photography, and then I had a photography business for a while. And then I got burnt out on that, and then moved into ministry, and now moving on to something else. And like we all have seasons. So even if you figure out what your next step is, great, but you don't have to figure out your next 10 steps because life is going to take you in different directions. So, I think there is some statistic that, adults change careers like 4 or 5 times or something like that. And I'm sure that's a fluid statistic and it probably changes year by year. But last I saw, it was something like that. And yeah, I feel like that's another reason why not to pressure kids to have their lives figured out, because things are going to change. Life is going to hit you in the face and you got to figure out how to go with it.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of kids don't know how to deal with that because they're just on this straight path. But I think our kids are on a good direction, good trajectory. I think that I'm really proud of all 3 of them, specifically right now, Jack graduating high school, because it has more meaning than just for him graduating. It's a just so they know, if they listen to this, that like even for us, it's like I guess fulfilling my mother's dream of hey, we're graduating high school, Haydn graduating college, Eli doing the awesome things and ranking up in the military, which I still to this day feel bad for like holding him back when he wanted to do it. I should have listened to him. With Jack, figuring something out, it's like, let them do what they need to do. If you raise good kids and they got a head on their shoulders, they'll figure it out. And even if you don't, the kids are going to figure it out, Nobody wants their kids to become like bums or anything like that. But if you teach them good and send them out, support them, and do all that, then I think that they're gonna be fine. I think that Jack's gonna be good and he'll find something. But it's a very sobering time for us to see Jack graduate, and that's kind of like this is a bad choice of words, a nail in the coffin.
Oh my gosh, that's a bad choice of words.
Hey,
what in the world? No, we're starting a new chapter.
Well, that's what I meant. Like, it's not a nail in the coffin.
Every ending is a beginning,
a closure to that chapter, and then for us to
nail in the coffin. Yeah, this is not a nail in a coffin. This is a one door closing and another door opening.
That's true. I don't know why you didn't like my nail in the coffin.
Didn't like it at all.
All right, so enough about that. So we'll wrap it up here in a minute, and we'll have another podcast where we talk more about you and all of the things. But I think a good introduction for you into the Fairview social world is seeing your heart for the children and all the things that we're doing. And for people that have listened to the podcast and seen the other ones and think that I'm an asshole, hey, I'm somewhat of a good parent. Somewhat.
Well, we balance each other out. When one of us gets too controlling, the other one gets more loosey-goosey or whatever. I don't know. But that's a bad choice of words, but it's not as bad as the nail in the coffin. But in any case, we do balance each other out. When one's too strict and the other's too free-flowing or whatever, those are fluid positions and we flip-flop. I mean, you've called me the fun Nazi before. I have been the fun Nazi before.
Oh, and let's talk about that, because you are the fun Nazi.
No, I used to be. Okay.
No, you're still the fun Nazi to me, because
Maybe sometimes I'm too square.
Back then, we didn't have any money. We still don't really have any money. But you didn't, it's like we never did anything. And then one day I was like, back when this was popular, it's not anymore, but like, hey, let's take the kids to a movie. Mm-hmm. We're going to go to a movie. And so it was like a big deal. And so the kids were all wound up and ready to go. Like, we're going to a movie. We're going to a theater. Because we never did that.
Yeah.
We never had any money back then. And so we go, and if this was like in the Hollis days with my dad and my brothers, like And my mom was like, we would, pack all kinds of treats and everything in my mom's purse, and then go to the movie and have all of our treats. But I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do it right. So we go in there, and one of the kids say, "Mother, Father," as if they're like poor little Timmy boy. "May I have some popcorn?" And I thought you would just be like, "No, we're not having popcorn." It didn't play out like that. That's
a little odd version of the story,
but you were like, no, we're not doing this and we're not doing that.
We're not getting a drink. We're not getting popcorn. We're paying for these tickets. We're going in there watching the movie, and then we're leaving. So yes, my husband called me the fun Nazi because I wouldn't let my kids have popcorn and soda at the movies. But the reason was because we didn't have any money.
I know, but the
this
kids
was also in the days where if we did go to the drive-thru at McDonald's, if we did, on the rare occasion we did, I would let them each get one burger, no fries, and they all got water. Or if I was feeling like splurging, I would get one order of fries and they would all share it. But
you know what?
These were days where we did not spend money.
I know. So
because we didn't have any.
Come on, let's rewind back to the theaters. So then tears fall from the kids' eyes because they're happy to be at the movie, but they weren't allowed to take it to the next level.
Mm-hmm. So then Papa had to step in.
And then I stepped in and I said, "You know what? We're getting popcorn and we're getting drinks. You're going to share the drinks and you can share the popcorn.
Yeah.
But you can get these things." And I'll never forget it. And it's like, no, you weren't being the fun Nazi. You were being smart and all that. But I laughed at you and made sure that you knew that you were no fun. But
I did learn it. You did teach me a lesson that day. You taught me that sometimes you got to let the kids just have an experience.
Yeah.
And it was more about the experience than the bank dollars that we had or didn't have or whatever, like the bank balance. So I did learn something there, that sometimes you do need to let loose and have fun.
Yeah, but in your defense, I kind of drilled it in over the years to make sure that we weren't spending any money because we didn't have any. But then to be able to splurge a little bit, we didn't ever go to a movie. And I know people listening that a movie's no big deal, but it was a huge deal for us back then. And
splurging, I think at the time with the popcorn and the sodas that we made them share, I mean, we probably spent $15 max on those, and that was a splurge. That was what I was holding back from, because back then it was a lot for us because we were broke.
Yeah, back then we were spending, I remember we were doing hey honey, here's $50 to get groceries for the family for 2 weeks.
The whole week, or 2 weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, but for 5 of us.
We hit up that Aldi's and make sure that we got our money's worth.
Yeah.
We was poor. We're poor now, but we're just rich or poor. We're rich or poor now. But anyway. So to wrap it up, Jack, we're proud of you for graduating.
We're very proud of you, Jack. We're very proud of all 3 of you boys, and you're smarter than you believe, and you're freaking adorable too. Mom has to say that.
That's true.
It's very true. You guys are adorable.
All of those things are true, and
babe, good job. We did it.
We did. Maybe we can take a breath now. But for the Fairview Social Podcast, stay tuned. Jeems will be back for more. Goodbye.
Goodbye.